the divine artist, the divine bureaucrat, the divine entrepreneur, the divine politician, the divine scientist, the divine farmer, the divine dentist, the divine registered nurse, the divine pharmacist, the divine computer systems analyst, the divine physician, the divine database administrator, the divine software developer, the divine firmware developer, the divine hardware developer, the divine freeware developer, the divine shareware developer, the divine middleware developer, the divine physical therapist, the divine web developer, the divine dental hygienist, the divine occupational therapist, the divine veterinarian, the divine computer programmer, the divine school psychologist, the divine physical therapist assistant, the divine interpreter and translator, the divine mechanical engineer, the divine veterinary technologist and technician, the divine epidemiologist, the divine IT information technology manager, the divine market research analyst, the divine diagnostic medical sonographer, the divine computer system administrator, the divine respiratory therapist, the divine medical secretary, the divine civil engineer, the divine substance abuse counselor, the divine speech-language pathologist, the divine landscaper and groundskeeper, the divine radiologic technologist, the divine cost estimator, the divine financial advisor, the divine marriage and family therapist, the divine medical assistant, the divine lawyer, the divine accountant, the divine compliance officer, the divine high school teacher, the divine clinical laboratory technician, the divine maintenance and repair worker, the divine bookkeeping, accounting, and audit clerk, the divine financial manager, the divine recreation and fitness worker, the divine insurance agent, the divine elementary school teacher, the divine dental assistant, the divine management analyst, the divine home health aide, the divine pharmacy technician, the divine construction manager, the divine public relations specialist, the divine middle school teacher, the divine massage therapist, the divine paramedic, the divine preschool teacher, the divine hairdresser, the divine marketing manager, the divine patrol officer, the divine school counselor, the divine executive assistant, the divine financial analyst, the divine personal care aide, the divine clinical social worker, the divine business operations manager, the divine loan officer, the divine meeting, convention, and event planner, the divine mental health counselor, the divine nursing aide, the divine sales representative, the divine architect, the divine sales manager, the divine HR, human resources specialist, the divine plumber, the divine real estate agent, the divine glazier, the divine art director, the divine customer service representative, the divine logistician, the divine auto mechanic, the divine bus driver, the divine restaurant cook, the divine child and family social worker, the divine administrative assistant, the divine receptionist, the divine cement mason and concrete finisher, the divine painter, the divine sports coach, the divine teacher assistant, the divine brick mason and block mason, the divine cashier, the divine janitor, the divine electrician, the divine delivery truck driver, the divine maid and housekeeper, the divine carpenter, the divine security guard, the divine construction worker, the divine fabricator, the divine telemarketer,